Your beats are ruining your drum and bass tracks. As an electronic music producer and award-winning composer with over 20 years of experience, I've spent my career learning what makes drum production sound professional. So in this video, I'm going to show you all the tips and tricks I've picked up over the years that you can implement right away to get professional level beats every time. Let's kick things off with a classic rookie error that quietly murders your drums before they've even had a chance. When I started producing back in 2003, all of the online advice was basically confined to just angry forum posts made by frustrated amateur producers. Despite making progress, I was constantly disappointed with my amateurish sounding drums. I figured that the problem could just be fixed with good mixing. Well, it turns out I was wrong. And the problem lied way earlier in the process. Eventually, a producer mate told me, look, when you build a house, you don't start by painting the walls. He's basically saying that if I didn't have a good foundation for my drums, then no amount of polish or mixing would help. When I realized that, I took the time to learn how to write better drum parts before trying to mix them. So how do you actually build that solid foundation for your drums? There's one skill that most beginners completely miss, and it ends up costing them hours of frustration. Luckily, I've got a simple trick that'll help you skip all of the guesswork and jump straight into your creative flow. Take this kick drum sound. Every kick has three simple parts. The hit, that sharp click at the very start. The body, the main thump that gives the drum its personality. And the tail, the deep boom at the end, controlling how long or short a sound feels.
When you can clearly hear these three parts, choosing the right drum sample becomes way easier.
So next time you're looking for drum sounds, quickly listen for these three parts. Instead of endlessly searching for something perfect, you'll immediately know if it's right for your track. Try sampling a favorite kick drum from a track that you love. Listen closely and identify the hit, body and tail. You'll quickly discover exactly what you like and don't like. This trick works just as well for snares, claps and other drum sounds too. So now we've made choosing samples a breeze, let's start looking at actually creating your drum parts. There are two main approaches, but beginners often get stuck deciding which one to use, not knowing if one is better than the other.
So for this method, you're going to drag your drum samples directly into Ableton. This method uses plain old audio and no fancy plugins. You can see the sound clip visually and you can easily copy and rearrange and edit just by dragging around on the timeline. Another benefit is that you've got one track for each drum and that makes it easier to mix in the end. Then there's method 2. So instead of individual audio clips, you load multiple drum sounds into a single MIDI instrument. So now you've got a whole drum kit on just one track. That makes swapping out individual sounds really easy, but mixing everything becomes a bit harder. So using audio is nice and simple, while MIDI gives you more flexibility. But what is actually better? The truth is that neither is always better. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. The real trick is knowing exactly when to use each one.
So here's exactly how I approach this, and you can just copy what I do. I use audio for kicks, snares and loops, and I use MIDI when I want to write percussion parts like hi-hats, so writing, editing and swapping samples becomes easier. Alright, let's actually write some beats now. You probably already know the classic drum and bass pattern, but sticking to that same recycled beat means your track could easily fade into the background, lost among hundreds of other similar tunes. If you're tired of sounding like everyone else, I've got a simple trick that'll instantly make your drums stand out. You've probably heard the classic advice: snare on beats 2 and 4, kick on beat 1, and then halfway through beat 3. This is called the two-step pattern, and it sounds like this. But here's the cool part. Just by shifting these drum hits slightly, you can create totally fresh rhythms and unique grooves.
Let's actually try this out right now. First, let's nudge that second kick slightly later. This beat feels a bit more wonky to me now. Now let's reset and move the snare slightly later instead. I really love this. It feels like a musical question that is left unanswered. Finally, let's experiment by adding an extra kick into the pattern. This instantly adds energy and punch and a bit of attitude. I'm just going to try some other patterns here too.
Here's your quick win. Just start dragging your kicks and snares around on the grid and see what happens. You'll instantly discover fresh grooves, unique rhythms, and maybe even a completely original feel that nobody else has tried yet. So now we've got the backbone of our beat sorted, it's time to add those extra details that really bring things to life. Skip this step and your beats could risk sounding flat, lifeless, and boring. Luckily, there are two easy ways to avoid this common mistake, and I use both in every single track I make. Let's start with the first and simplest method. When you listen carefully to a finished DNB beat, you'll notice three main parts: the kick, the snare, and the percussion layers. The kick and snare give your beat its backbone, but percussion is what adds excitement, groove, and energy. One of the easiest ways to add percussion is using loops and breaks, but be careful, because there are a few hidden traps that can quickly ruin your beat if you're not careful. That's why it's so important to know exactly how to choose and use loops effectively. So how do you pick the right loops? Here's exactly what to look for and what to avoid. First, look for loops with lively percussion, fast, energetic rhythms that add excitement and groove. Second, consider loops that are simpler, with fewer hits and more space. This helps your mix breathe and sound cleaner. Finally, watch out for loops that already contain kicks and snares. These extra drums can muddy up your carefully built pattern. But don't worry, there's a quick fix to this. If you find a loop you love, but it has unwanted kicks and snares, just add a simple high-pass filter, a basic EQ that removes the low-end frequencies. This cleans up the loop, preventing it from clashing with your existing drums. Give it a try, it's quick, easy, and instantly improves your percussion. Using loops is convenient as hell, and they can definitely bring some human feel to your drums. But there's a downside. You lose control over the details, becoming a slave to the loop that you've chosen. For our second method for adding percussion, let's talk about writing your own parts from scratch, giving you total control over your beat's energy. When beginner producers try writing hi-hats, they often end up sounding like this. It's rigid, robotic, and not human at all. But what if I told you we could take that exact same pattern and using just two simple techniques, make it sound more like this? Much better, right? But why is that? Well, real drummers naturally hit harder and softer as they play. They don't have absolutely perfect timing either. So the trick to making percussion more lifelike is adding subtle variations in volume and timing.
So how exactly do we do that? Well, let me show you two easy ways. Using a MIDI drum rack, you can easily control the volume or velocity of each hit. Even randomly making some hits louder instantly adds a human feel. Here's an example with random accents. Or try emphasizing every third hit for a rhythmic groove. We can add subtle timing changes to make our pattern more natural as well. The easiest way to do this is by adding a small amount of swing, which slightly shifts the timing of your hits. Keep it subtle or your percussion might clash with the rest of your beat. Let me add a groove to this pattern here. I'm going to click this button next to groove. I'm going to select swing 16th notes 73. In order to hear this, you need to make sure that your global amount here is set to 100%. This is a bit too extreme, so we can just reduce the timing down to, say, 40. That adds a nice subtle effect. If you want to see what the groove actually looks like, you can click this button here, which will consolidate the groove to your actual MIDI. And you can see now, each first note is slightly longer than every other note. This is a good way to add some extra human feel. And here's an example with some extra samples, volume and timing variation all together. The easiest method of all is using an effect called Humanize. It automatically adds random subtle variations in timing for every hit. Be careful not to add too much or things can start to sound messy.
So we've now covered nearly everything you need to write great DNB drums. But there's one final technique many producers overlook, and skipping it can leave your beat sounding stiff, empty or incomplete. Luckily, it's easy to fix and might just be the final puzzle piece you're missing. Listen carefully to this beat. Notice those subtle hits bouncing between the main snares. You might think that they're part of the percussion, but they're actually called ghost snares. Ghost snares happen naturally when a real drummer lightly taps the snare drum between louder hits. These little taps add groove, excitement, and subtle movement to your beats. They're such a classic part of drum and bass beats that we absolutely need to talk about them.
So how can you easily create ghost snares for yourself? Well, here's the simplest method. We're going to just download a different snare sample. You can actually search for ghost snare if that helps. And we're going to make this a bit quieter than our main snare. To get that classic shuffle feel, we'll place the ghost snares in between our main hits. We're going to place one here and one here. We're going to keep their volume low so they add a subtle groove without overpowering your main snare hits.
So now you know how to write epic drum parts for your DNB tracks that are ready for mixing. But beats alone don't get you to a finished track. And sometimes starting with a tune you already know can be the perfect way to get your creativity flowing. That's why you should watch this video next, where I show you how I took a famous pop song and made it into an original DNB banger.